The alien didn't speak, it remembered me. And when it turned toward me with eyes still closed, the forest itself held its breath. We move through places that remember us better than we remember ourselves. A mist rolls low across the roots, whispering in chords no language ever needed. Somewhere beneath layers of mulch and time, something feels her coming. Not heard, not seen. Feels. Like a note waiting for its harmony. Former recon specialist Kaylin Wren doesn't know that yet. She just knows her tactical link keeps shorting out every time she nears the edge of the hollow. Her boots crunch down on dirt that's more nerve than soil, and somewhere inside her hip rig, a pulse sensor pings once and dies with a whimper. She's here to find a signal that shouldn't exist. A pulse of biological resonance, whatever that means. The order came directly from the oversight relay embedded in an authorization packet that smelled too clean for her liking. Just one line repeated in 6 dialects, subject detected in harmonic hollow. Classify and retrieve. You won't be able to stop being curious. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. She moves deeper into the hollow. No bird song, no drone clicks, only the thump of her heartbeat and that strange pressure, like walking into a memory. Her visor glitches again, shuddering into static. It never did that before, not even on missions that ended with her coughing up smoke in evac tunnels. She taps the side of her helmet and mutters, "Real smooth, Rin. Go into the hallucination forest with prototype gear and a history of regret." Great plan. The forest doesn't answer, but something out there does. It doesn't move like a predator. No crunch, no rustle, just subtraction, a space that unhappens the moment she looks at it. At first, she thinks it's shadow distortion. Then she blinks and the thing is there. Not cloaked, not camouflaged, simply not in her spectrum. A man tall, bare-armed, moving as if the wind spoke to his bones. He doesn't look up, doesn't see her, but he stops and waits. Kaylin does what any recon specialist taught to approach unknowns till she draws her sidearm and immediately regrets it. The moment her fingers curl around the grip, the forest reacts. The vines near her boots slither ever so slightly. Leaves tremble like they're hooked into her nervous system. Okay, noted. No sudden violence in the mood-sensitive hallucination jungle. She holsters her weapon. The man, if he is one, tilts his head a fraction too slow for natural movement. He's blind. Not in the way of wounds or glassy stares. His eyes are closed, lashes down like they're shielding him from light itself. Still, he walks with the eerie confidence of someone who's never been lost. Kaylin watches him step across a gap in the forest floor where roots should snap. They don't. The gap seals under his foot like the terrain forgives him, or welcome him. Her boots, meanwhile, crunch a little too loudly. The vines recoil. He speaks only once, just loud enough for her helmet mic to catch. "If you're here to save me," he says, voice dry like wind on dead leaves, "you're late by 12 years. Kaylin doesn't respond. Not yet. She lets her HUD scan him. Temperature, nominal heartbeat, steady no biometric ID match. Odd. The oversight system tags every known human with an ocular code before puberty. No exceptions. Unless her breath catches. No. That project was purged. Project Echo Mind, she murmurs, mostly to herself. The man's jaw tightens. Funny. You say that like it's still a name, not an erasure. Kaylin steps forward slower now. Her HUD blinks a red warning. System desync. Spatial anomaly detected. She overrides the alert. The man Thorn is already moving again, bare feet pressing into roots that retract like courteous doormen. She follows. What else can she do? Her link to the echelon grid has fully collapsed. No GPS, no heartbeat tracking, no terrain overlay. The only thing still functioning is a basic pulse scanner, and even that's starting to skip beats like it's trying to fake cardiac arrest. Her voice wavers when she finally speaks again. "What is this place?" He doesn't answer, just raises one hand and gestures a spiral motion fingers, curved like drawing a snail shell. "The forest doesn't have a name," he says. "It remembers yours." Behind her, the path she walked begins to blur. She checks over her shoulder and blinks. The route she took to get here is already unrecognizable. Roots have shifted tree bark pulses like breath. She whispers, "That's not possible." "Stop using that word," Thorn mutters. "It's one of the ones that makes it hungry." Kaylin catches up to him and walks beside him, trying to hide the tremor in her limbs. He doesn't look at her, not even once. "You're really blind?" she asks. I perceive, he replies. His tone isn't proud or angry, just patient, like a teacher waiting for a student to catch up without realizing they've enrolled. Kaylin exhales. Her training is unraveling in layers: tactical logic, terrain analysis, mission priority. All of it slides off her like water off waxed metal. And deep in her chest, something shifts. Something old. Something she thought she buried after the second collapse. She lets it rise. Because this man might be the signal she came to find. But he's also the ghost of something she helped erase. And the hollow doesn't echo lies. The man moved without urgency, without sound, and without opening his eyes. Kaylin tried matching his pace, but her boots struck the ground like hammers compared to his featherlight steps. She finally disabled her auditory dampeners just to hear how loud she truly was. The result was humbling. Every breath, every movement of synthetic fabric, every exhale of micro-hydraulics in her exosuit, she sounded like a glitching marching band. The hollow heard it all. At first she thought she was hallucinating when the vines near her ankles swayed away. But when she tripped on a cluster of moss and tried to right herself, the terrain stiffened. Literally stiffened. Roots beneath her feet curled inward, like they were bracing against her. "That thing where you stumble," Thorne said softly, still walking ahead of her. "It feels like hesitation. The hollow doesn't like hesitation." Kaylin straightened, adjusted the strap on her shoulder rig, and stepped forward deliberately. No stumble this time. The terrain softened. "Right," she muttered. "Empathic botany. Classic recon field day." He smirked. "Wait." Smirk. For a man who hadn't turned around once, he had uncanny timing. His back was to her, yet his awareness curled back like sonar. The forest responded to him not as an intruder, but as part of the system. Kaylin tried scanning him again, this time, with passive range, but the readout returned only one word. Null. "Let me guess," she called. "You don't show up on echelon scans either." "I'll show up," he replied. "Just not in the ways they like." That sounded like poetry, or sarcasm, or both. Kaylin hated both. The trees began thinning. Ahead, a shallow glade shimmered with patches of bioluminescence, blue ripples on fungal beds, yellow blossoms pulsing like heartbeats. Kaylin's feet slowed of their own accord. "Are those safe?" No, Thorne said. "Not unless you mean it." She arched her brow. "Mean what?" He tilted his head again. "Whatever you're about to step on." "Okay, definitely sarcasm." Still, Kaylin stepped carefully into the clearing. The ground here had no uniform texture, just nodes of soft moss, glassy fungal blooms, and glittering spore caps that seemed to twitch when approached. Thorne moved through it like a conductor, and the terrain responded in kind, his footfalls never touching the same color twice. Kaylin didn't try to mimic it. Instead, she focused on keeping her movements intentional, her breath steady, her thoughts singular. She reached deep into her recon training, not for combat, but for meditation drills they'd mocked back at the academy. "Override chaos through rhythm," the instructor used to say. "Your heartbeat's older than your tactics." She found her pace again. When she caught up to Thorne, he was kneeling beside a hollow stump pulsing with faint green light. He reached in and pulled out something delicate, a tangle of wires half buried in the growth, like the forest had swallowed old tech, and decided to nurse it. It was a data node. Old Genio. Maybe pre-collapse. Kaylin blinked. "That shouldn't be active." "It isn't," he said, rotating it in his palm. "It's resonating. Resonating with what you." She stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or scan for concussion symptoms. Instead, she crouched beside him. The node pulsed again, twice in sync with her breath, once with her heartbeat. Then it fell still. "See," he said. "Not really," she replied. "You're going to have to dumb this down a bit." He handed her the node, and the moment it touched her skin, her suit's HUD reactivated, only briefly, only a flicker, but enough for a single string of data to appear: biological anchor match found. Then it vanished. Kaylin's fingers tightened around the node. "You're not just a survivor of Echo Mind," she whispered. "You're one of the anchor points." Thorne didn't reply, which of course was confirmation enough. She rose and tucked the node into her side pouch. "They said Echo Mind was scrapped because it didn't yield viable test results." But you're walking around like the damn forest built you a guest room. It didn't, he said. A beat. I built it one. Kalen paused. Are you saying this hollow recognizes you because I adapted first? He interrupted. Before it learned to reflect us, it learned to not reject me. Her breath caught, because rejection was all Echo Mind had received from oversight. And now the forest had learned a new language, one Thorn already spoke fluently. Kalen glanced sideways at him. There was something else about the way he moved, not just awareness, anticipation. Like he didn't wait for the world to appear, he felt where it would be and let it arrive at his feet. She'd seen elite drone operators pilot with less grace, and here he was, walking barefoot across the pulse of a biome built from nervous wreckage. You ever get tired of being poetic, she asked. He smiled. You get used to it when vision doesn't drown out the music. Kalen didn't smile back, but for the first time since arriving, she wasn't afraid of the silence between them. They walked together now, not quite side by side. His sense of space was fluid, hers still tethered to geometry, but in rhythm. The hollow rustled gently overhead, no longer distorting underfoot. The bioluminescence calmed. The air shifted from pressure to presence. Then faintly Kalen caught something at the edge of perception. Not a sound. A lack of one. A space hollowed by footsteps not her own. She froze. Thorn stopped too. Another one, she whispered. No, he said, his voice low and strange. Not like us. She turned slowly and saw nothing. But the hollow rippled anyway, and the space behind them forgot how to stay still. The absence pressed in like humidity before a storm, thick, slow, and inexplicably intelligent. Kalen shifted her weight subtly, eyes scanning for movement, but there was none. Instead, the hollow itself began to warp in micro-flinches. Leaves curled inward. Spores dimmed. Tree bark took on a sheen like metal sweating under stress. Is it tracking us, she murmured, hand instinctively drifting toward her weapon before pausing. She remembered what happened last time she reached for violence in here. The vines remembered too. No, Thorn said quietly. It's observing. Kalen's brow furrowed. What's the difference? If it tracks you, it wants to find you. If it observes... He turned slightly, not facing her, not facing the threat, but somewhere off-axis, as if speaking to the air. Then it wants to decide what you are. Her tactical nerves screamed. Surveillance class behaviors, pattern recognition, autonomous classification. Echelon, she breathed. Thorn nodded, jaw tight. Or a sub-drone. They use sub-auditory scanning in places they can't see. Places like here. Kalen cursed under her breath. She'd read the reports. Echelon drones didn't hunt in the traditional sense. They pruned, identified cognitive anomalies and excised them before the system had to deal with inconsistencies. To Echelon, blindness wasn't a disability. It was unreadable. A threat. How close, she asked. Thorn raised one hand, index and middle fingers extended. 2 bends, maybe 3 heartbeats. It's pulsing a net, but we're still soft in the grid. Not yet quantified. She almost asked how he knew, but then she remembered the node, and the way the forest deferred to him like a loyal dog that only barked when fear arrived. Can it detect emotional states? It can only read what you perform, Thorn said. So stop performing fear. Easier said than done, especially when a subtle vibration passed through the ground, too low for her suit's seismic sensors to confirm but unmistakable to her nerves. She had the sudden irrational urge to hum. Not from fear, but to drown the silence. Thorn seemed to pick up on that. Quiet helps, but rhythm helps more. He began walking again, this time more slowly. Each step was a small note toe to heel to weight. His head remained angled slightly, like tuning forks were embedded in his skull. Kalen mimicked him. Her foot landed intentionally, and the moss beneath accepted her without protest. She didn't rush, didn't scan, just felt. After 5 paces, the vibration stopped. She dared a whisper. Did we lose it? Thorn shook his head. We became uncertain. It doesn't follow uncertainty. Kalen wanted to say something sarcastic, wanted to return to the comfort of being the most informed person in the room, but there was no room anymore, just layers of unspoken rules, and one man who had memorized them, not through study, but survival. They came to a sloped corridor of hanging roots, each the width of her arm dangling like a curtain. Beyond that, faint flickers of blue bioluminescent spores drifting sideways like ash caught in sideways gravity. Thorne stopped. We enter, that we disappear. Kaylin narrowed her eyes. From the drone. From everything. She tilted her head. Good or bad? Necessary, he replied. He stepped through first. Kaylin hesitated. The root curtain felt thick, not in texture, but in meaning, as if each tendril held a memory that might bite her if she walked through too carelessly. She thought back to her worst missions, sappers lost in coal mines, bioagents leaking through filters, rookies screaming in languages they hadn't learned before dying. The forest could amplify those, would amplify them. But then she saw him already past the threshold, turned toward her, his face unreadable, his eyes still closed, a silent offer in the tilt of his chin. Come or don't. She stepped through, and the world blinked, not like waking from a dream, more like swapping lenses, except now there was no edge to the space around her. The hollow structure dissolved. Roots became lines of motion. Spores became dots of data flaring gently with emotional proximity. Her body felt like a wire tuning to a song too ancient to be composed. No sound, just resonance. A forest shaped by cognition, not built from carbon, but curated by feeling. Kaylin staggered slightly. Where are we? Still inside, Thorne said. But further. The glade here was silent in that way. Snow is silent, not emptiness, but the hush of too many answers layered in white noise. Every surface shimmered faintly with echo trails, residual emotion, she guessed. This was less terrain and more mnemonic tissue. Does the hollow remember everyone, she asked. No, Thorne replied. Just the ones who forgot themselves. Kaylin blinked. That's cryptic. Everything in here is. He walked to a pillar-like structure, half tree, half stone, and placed his palm against it. A soft glow erupted outward in concentric circles, pulsing like sonar. For a moment she thought she saw images, hands, mouths, fragments of faces not carved, but remembered. Echo mind, he said simply. Her breath caught. You mean this is it? It was the foundation node, Thorne said. Before the project was purged, they seeded a resonance lattice across the sector, neural empathy as navigational structure. You didn't find paths, you felt your way home. But the system failed, Kaylin murmured. No, he said. Oversight failed. It demanded patterns that didn't match. She stepped closer, the gravity of the moment sinking in. He was showing her the very bones of what she once destroyed. You know, she whispered, I signed the decommission order. Thorne turned his head toward her slowly. His expression didn't change, but his next words carried a weight not even the hollow could absorb. I know. Kaylin said nothing. For the first time since stepping into the hollow, silence didn't feel like safety. It felt like penance. She stared at the half-organic pillar, pulsing with memory, wondering how many lives it once connected. EchoMind had been sold to the oversight panels as unstable, expensive, too interpretive to quantify. The official brief had called it technologically whimsical. She remembered the phrasing because she'd laughed when she read it. Laughed. Now standing inches from its luminous remains, she could hear a hum rising behind her chest, like the lattice remembered the mockery and never forgot the laugh. She reached out to touch the pillar. Thorne stopped her with a soft but sharp intake of breath. Not yet, he said. It's not calibrated to your guilt. Kaylin froze, hand hovering just shy of the glowing bark. I'm not here to justify, he offered. She lowered her arm. I was going to say undo. But yeah, that too. Thorne didn't nod, didn't shrug. He just stepped back from the node and walked toward a depression in the earth, ringed by luminous reeds, each one twitching like an antennae stuck in a breeze. They won't speak to you until they've heard your weight, he said. Weight what you carry, he explained, kneeling in the grass. It's how this place tunes. You don't get to walk the hollow clean. She moved toward him, her boots dampening the reeds underfoot. They glowed red where she passed. Is that why you're still here? He exhaled a slow, almost amused breath. I left. Came back. Couldn't not come back. Kaylin sat opposite him, unsure when she decided it was okay to kneel in dirt designed to read her psychology. She glanced around. The reeds were dimmer now, flickering yellow like candlelight seen through wet eyes. "Why come back?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Because nothing out there," Thorne said, gesturing vaguely, wanted someone who didn't see with the right eyes. That silenced her, because that much at least she understood. He turned his face toward her, not looking but knowing her location, with eerie precision. "I didn't ask to be born this way," he said, "but I was." They called it neural precognition. I felt events seconds before they occurred, not predictions. Pressures, like air tightening in a room right before lightning strikes. Kaylin's fingers curled in her lap, and Echo Mind found us, trained us, then left us behind the moment we stopped being predictable. Kaylin shook her head. "I didn't know. You didn't want to." That stung, but she didn't argue, because she hadn't. She had seen the numbers, the failure rates, the anomalies. What she hadn't seen were the people inside the data sets. Not until one of them sat across from her, not blinking, not accusing, but not forgiving either. "Was there anyone else?" she asked. 13, he replied. "I'm the only one the hollow didn't drive mad or consume." That last word chilled her. "Consume, not physically," he clarified. "Conceptually. The wayless, the ones still wandering, they can't leave because they forgot how to feel anything real. They performed emotion so long they forgot how it starts." Kaylin shivered despite the warmth in the clearing. "I signed your end," she said after a long pause. "You signed our beginning," Thorne replied. She blinked. He went on, tone gentler now. "When the system purged us, we stopped being trackable. That's the only reason I'm alive. The only reason the hollow didn't sterilize this place. I stopped existing in a way Echelon could understand." Kaylin chuckled, once bitter. "So the only way to survive was to be deleted." "No," Thorne said, a faint smile in his voice. "The only way to evolve was to stop translating yourself for people who never planned to understand you." The glade shifted. Kaylin felt it not visually, but atmospherically, like a thought completing itself in the walls of her lungs. She looked down. The reeds around her had turned blue. Thorne nodded. "You're starting to harmonize." She exhaled, and for the first time her breath didn't feel like an intrusion. Still, a part of her bristled. "Is that all this is? Some redemption arc in plant form?" Thorne laughed short, tired but warm. "You think it's about you?" Kaylin's smirk twitched. "Maybe a little. No one earns the path," he said. "You just walk it anyway." Her eyes caught something flickering just beyond the glade. Figures, shadows in the tree line. Not dangerous, not fast, just lost. Meandering silhouettes without definition. Faces blurred like underwater memories. One wore a child's backpack. Another still wore an old fleet uniform, tattered and grown into the moss. "The Wayless," she whispered. Thorne nodded once. "Some have been here since the first echo burst. They don't know they're trapped. They just think they haven't found the right direction yet." Kaylin watched one of the figures kneel in front of a glowing stone. Its hands hovered above it, unsure, trembling. "Can they be helped?" "Yes," Thorne said. "A beat, but not by leading them." Kaylin turned to him. "Then how by standing with them until they remember how to move again?" They sat in silence as the shadows passed like echoes through the underbrush. Then Kaylin spoke softly. "I still don't know the way." Thorne smiled. "No one does." Then he rose, slow and silent. "But I can feel it when you're ready to walk." When they moved again, the forest moved with them, not like before, when it recoiled or resisted, but like a companion adjusting its posture. Each step Kaylin took now felt less like travel and more like translation of herself, of intent, of memory into momentum. Thorne didn't lead so much as drift just ahead, his hand occasionally brushing a vine here, a node bulb there, as though asking the hollow for continued permission. Kaylin still watched her footing. Years of recon habit weren't so easily unwound, but she no longer scanned every surface like it was a potential trap, because it wasn't the forest that was lethal. It was her own mind weaponized by the terrain. She realized that fact sharply, viscerally, when she caught the scent. Warm sand, synthetic oil, blood under heat. The smell detonated memory across her synapses before she could prepare. Suddenly the world shimmered. Not visually, but in weight. Pressure returned not from gravity, but from association. She recognized this path. It was an echo of Ralden 9. where she'd made a call that cost 43 civilians their lives, the evac shuttle that never arrived, the transmission she ordered jammed to keep enemy comms disrupted, unknowing that a group of refugees were broadcasting their final coordinates on that same bandwidth. She stopped walking. The hollow responded. Roots twisted. Leaves dimmed. The path ahead darkened, not with shadow, but regret given form and foliage. Her tactical HUD flickered once without power and displayed the face of a child from the Ralden massacre. Not as image, as sensation. She felt his last hope like a stone on her chest. Thorne didn't turn, but he slowed. "Now you see," he murmured. Kalen's hand trembled. "It's not real. It's not false either." "I didn't know," she said, voice cracking. "I know, but it doesn't forgive." "No," Thorne said. "The hollow doesn't forgive. It remembers honestly." She wanted to run, back, forward, anywhere, but her feet wouldn't lift, because to run would mean turning her back on this guilt. And if she turned her back, the terrain would twist it into a predator. She exhaled shakily, took one step forward, then another. With each footfall, the vision changed, not fading, but completing. The image of the child blurred, then resolved not as a ghost, but as a reflection. Her own silhouette, head bowed, hands open. The memory didn't disappear. It settled. She kept walking. The terrain smoothed. The light brightened. And Thorne smiled. "Your ghosts walk lighter now." Kalen managed a laugh, thin and hollow. "Do yours ever stop walking? They just stop whispering." She caught up to him again. Something had shifted between them. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of something quieter. A shared wound, perhaps. A grief neither had named until now. She glanced sideways. "You said the hollow reacts to performance. What about suppression?" Thorne's expression tightened, but only for a moment. "Suppression's just performance with better posture." The forest ahead curved downward into a basin where no sound carried, not because of distance, but because the air itself absorbed it. The silence felt thick, padded with emotional cotton. It reminded Kalen of interrogation chambers, places designed to make people unravel through isolation. But this wasn't sterile, it was sad. Shapes moved at the edge of the basin. Figures again. The wayless. Dozens of them now drifting through half-formed memory projections, like sleepwalkers in a museum curated by their own subconscious. One wore an EVA suit with cracked visors. Another whispered names to the moss. A third simply stood motionless, gazing at a wall of light that flickered in and out like a glitching star map. "They're stuck here," Kalen whispered. "They're stuck inside here," Thorne corrected, tapping the side of his head. Kalen's breath misted despite the warmth. "Why show me this because you were almost one of them?" "I still could be." Thorne tilted his head. "You won't. You're too stubborn to surrender that way." She didn't smile, but she didn't argue either. They moved on, navigating through the wayless like ghosts among ghosts. None reached for them. None acknowledged their presence. Yet Kalen felt their pain like echoes vibrating off her ribs. "They feel like fractures," she murmured. "They are," Thorne said. "Not dead. Just splintered." Their cognitive feedback loops caught the hollow's attention, and then it couldn't let them go until they rewrote themselves. "And that's possible," Hard, he admitted. "But possible. I've helped too." "What happened to them?" "They stopped trying to walk out and started walking in." Kalen frowned. "That sounds like death." "That's because you're still thinking in 3 dimensions." Ahead, the terrain shifted again, boulders now, but smooth like bone, arranged in patterns too symmetrical to be natural. The rocks emitted low pulses Kalen couldn't hear, but could feel in her gut. Not sound, but mood. They passed a formation that vibrated hope, another pulse loss, and then one that sang longing, unmistakably hers. She stopped beside it, knees weak. "Is this?" "It's yours," Thorne confirmed. "Your first memory, not the one you recall, the one that formed you." Kalen reached out. Her fingers hovered, and she saw it. Not as a video, not even as a dream, but as truth made terrain. A small child standing in a hangar watching her mother leave for a war she wouldn't survive. The child didn't cry, didn't reach, just stood still, learning in that moment that to be seen was to be left. That's when the first suppression formed. That's when Kalen learned to disappear inside order. She pulled her hand back. Thorn didn't say anything, but the hollow pulsed gently around them, acknowledging, not intruding. As they continued on, Kalen whispered, "This place, it doesn't want to kill you." "No," Thorn agreed. "It wants to see you, entirely. And what if it doesn't like what it sees?" He looked straight ahead, sightless but clear. "It never dislikes. It only reflects. The hating part that's on us." By the time they reached the edge of the basin, Kalen's breath had adjusted to the rhythm of the hollow. She no longer noticed when the forest changed colors or when the wind carried a sound that wasn't really sound. It all blended into a strange new baseline, one that made sense not in logic but in feeling. Then the whispers started, soft, fragmented, almost comical in their randomness. "Where's the sky? Does this moss taste like green? Turn left when the sadness thins." Kalen stopped walking. Thorn didn't. "Who is that?" she asked. He slowed but didn't turn. "Them." She looked around. No one was visible. No shapes like before. Just the undercurrent of whispers echoing from nowhere and everywhere. The wayless, he continued. "Most don't speak to others, but the hollow leaks fragments." Kalen's skin prickled, so it broadcast their internal dialogue. "Not dialogue," he corrected. "Dissonance." They moved forward again, the ground becoming granular underfoot, like crushed shell or weathered plastic. Kalen noticed small objects embedded in the terrain, a wristwatch here, a pen light there, even a child's drawing, laminated and yellowed. "Artifacts," she murmured. "Memories that wouldn't let go," Thorn said. "Sometimes when people collapse here, the hollow crystallizes their strongest attachments." Ahead, something large stirred. Kalen's instincts flared, but Thorn didn't slow. Out of the mist emerged a figure twice her height, draped in what looked like shredded EVA suits, moss-laced tubing, and fragments of old helmets. At first, Kalen thought it was a statue built from war debris, but then it breathed, a long, dragging inhale that trembled through the underbrush. The creature turned. Its face was a blank dome of scarred synth glass welded shut. Kalen's hand moved almost involuntarily toward her sidearm. Thorn didn't need to look. "Don't!" She froze. "That thing's not dangerous," he said. "Just loud." The creature tilted its head. A rasping voice emerged from its grill, modulated, broken, but unmistakably human in cadence. "Error. Recalibrating. You're not my echo." Kalen took a step back. "It's speaking?" Thorn nodded. It was a pilot. Nav control got corrupted by resonance feedback. His mind mapped wrong thought every direction was home. Eventually, he stopped walking. The creature. The Echo Walker. Kalen thought shuffled one step forward. The ground pulsed beneath it, not in warning, but in accommodation. The forest made space for his broken trajectory. "What happens if he tries to leave?" she asked. "He can't," Thorn said. "Not unless someone walks beside him, without trying to lead." Kalen exhaled slowly. "That theme's getting real familiar. You'll find it repeats." She watched as the Echo Walker turned away, disappearing into another fog bank of forgotten paths. The hollow folded gently behind him, and then they heard screaming. Real screaming. No resonance. No metaphor. Human. Alive. Kalen spun. "That's not Wayless." Thorn tensed. "No, it's someone new." Without another word, they both ran, Kalen adjusting her pace to keep within Thorn's field of non-vision. He moved faster than she expected, using the hollow like a living map. The terrain responded, branching roots pulling aside light cones, shifting. Kalen's HUD blipped once, then burst into static. Someone was broadcasting panic at the wrong frequency. They found the source 30 meters uphill, tangled in a gnarled tree that had woven itself into a cage. Inside, a young man, thrashed body half glitched between real and projected memory. His face shifted moment to moment from child to soldier to something in between. Kalen cursed. He's caught in a recursive loop. Thorn knelt beside the root system. New arrival. His mind's trying to render trauma faster than the hollow can parse it. "Can we get him out?" "Not by force. You'll rupture the memory field." Kalen didn't like that answer. She dropped to one knee eye level with the writhing man. "Hey," she said, soft and firm. "You're not broken. You're buffering." The man froze. His face flickered. She pressed a palm to the root, just enough to let her own pulse sync with the lattice. "Your name's still in here," she whispered. "You just haven't sung it in a while." The man inhaled. Thorn touched Kalen's shoulder lightly. "You're harmonizing." The roots shivered, and then released. The man slumped forward unconscious but breathing. The forest bent away, ashamed maybe, or simply relieved. Kalen cradled him gently. "Is he going to forget all this?" she asked. "No," Thorn said. "But now he has a direction." She looked at him, truly looked, and for a moment saw the outline of something much older in him, like a tuning fork carved from grief and grace. "Do you do this often?" Thorn shrugged. "When I can, when I'm allowed." Kalen stood slowly, carrying the unconscious man over her shoulder. The hollow didn't resist. In fact, the terrain eased their steps. "Where do we take him?" she asked. "Not far," Thorn said. "There's a place where the Wayless sit. If he hears them before he forgets too much, he might never be one." As they walked, Kalen asked the question she hadn't yet dared. "What happens if you get lost again?" Thorn smiled faintly. "I don't. I'm no longer trying to escape." The glade where they brought the young man was quiet, not in silence, but in containment, like a library built from emotion. Several Wayless sat nearby, cross-legged or curled like children, unmoving, but not comatose. Kalen recognized the signs not of sleep, but of recalibration. One, a woman with silver threading through her dreadlocks, opened her eyes as they approached. She didn't speak, just nodded once. Slow, accepting. Thorn eased the unconscious man onto a bed of phosphorescent grass which pulsed dimly under his body like it was adjusting his dreams. Kalen stepped back, still watching. "He'll wake?" she asked. "If he wants to," Thorn replied. "If he doesn't, the hollow will carry his weight until he's light enough to stand again." That sounded horrifyingly beautiful. They left the glade, and behind them, the hollow closed. The trees thickened again, not in hostility, but discretion, as though agreeing not to let the young man's story be read too early. Kalen's shoulders tensed, then released. She hadn't realized how much she'd started to feel the hollow's breath as feedback on her own emotional state. She noticed something else, then her HUD hadn't flickered in over an hour. No disruption, no static. Just absence. "Thorn," she said, voice low. "Where's the echelon drone?" He didn't answer immediately, because they both felt it first. A vibration in the roots. A distant hum, mechanical, not organic. "It's back," he said. "Different node. More aggressive scan." Kalen swore. "How's it still tracking?" "It's not. It's guessing. Interpolating anomalies in emotional field density." She laughed once. "We're literally being hunted by an algorithmic mood ring." Thorn didn't return the laugh. "It's not funny." "No," he agreed. "But it's true." The hum grew louder. Not approaching in a line, but in layers, like a scanner moving across multiple wavelengths. Kalen crouched instinctively, slipping into recon stance. But her muscles screamed a warning, "Don't fight the hollow." Thorn stood still, head tilted. "It's trying to label us," he murmured. Kalen's mouth went dry. "Can it? It wants to. It can't. That makes it desperate." The clearing around them flickered, trees jittering like broken polygons, moss unraveling in spiral bursts. The hollow's harmony was being forcibly rewritten by an external algorithm. Then Kalen saw it. Descending from above, not flying, but gliding, was the echelon subdrone. Oval-shaped, sleek, matte black, with a shimmer of green across its hull, like it had been skinned in peacock tears. It had no weapons, not visibly, just the piercing, ever-roving lens at its front scanning for definable metrics. Kalen held her breath. She knew these things. Built by the Oversight Accord to root out non-standard cognition. A threat not because of guns, but because of certainty. They decided what reality should be, and then enforced it with recursive logic. It hovered, angling toward them. Then it spoke. Perceptual anomaly detected. Harmonization exceeds normative thresholds. Identity unknown. Cross-indexing. Kalen felt her pulse spike. Thorn stepped forward. His face is calm, his body radiating neutrality. "I'll handle it," Kalen hissed. "Thorn." "No," he said firmly. "It needs contradiction." The drone rotated toward him. Visual data incomplete, vocal resonance inconsistent, cognitive pattern fragmented. Query, define yourself. Thorne tilted his head. I'm the silence between conclusions. Kalen's heart stopped. The drone buzzed louder, recalibrating. Define. Thorne took a breath. I am what exists when you stop needing the answer. There was a moment, an actual glitch, a shimmer across the drone's surface. The hollow behind it shivered. Error, the drone said. Kalen stepped beside him now, something burning in her. You want a definition, she growled. We're what happens when your categories break. The drone buzzed again. Emotion unstable. Threat potential unclear. Kalen pulled the data node from her pouch, the one that had once resonated with her heartbeat, and tossed it at the drone's feet. Then chase this. The node activated, bursting with stored harmonic residue. The forest sang, not melodically, emotionally. Raw fear, grief, wonder, joy all at once. A deluge of unquantifiable input. The drone vibrated, lens flashing rapidly. Error. Input invalid. Pattern exceeds threshold. Kalen turned to Thorne. Now he nodded. Now. They ran. The forest opened. Not a path, something deeper. Something only visible to those no longer looking. Kalen closed her eyes. Not a step missed. Behind them, the drone spiraled, trapped in a feedback loop, trying to classify what had no labels. The hollow fed it layer upon layer of unsorted resonance, until its lens cracked, its body dropped, and the trees quietly swallowed it whole. The hollow closed behind them like a book that never wanted to be opened in the first place. Kalen didn't stop until her lungs reminded her that instincts weren't oxygen. When she finally paused, hunched over near a thick knot of bark shaped like a clenched fist, the air tasted of adrenaline and sap. Thorne stood a few meters away, his breath, even chest rising, with the kind of composure that only someone long experienced with running through chaos could manage. She looked up. That's twice now. Thorne turned his head toward her. Twice what you've pulled me through the fire I helped light. A pause. Then he offered almost gently. You didn't design the match. You just lit the end they handed you. Kalen didn't know if that was supposed to make her feel better. It didn't, but it did make her feel seen. They pressed on. The terrain changed again subtly. Trees gave way to tall, spiraled growths, like elongated seashells carved from living bone, pulsing with faint bioluminescent threads. Each step triggered a chime, not heard but felt behind the eyes. Kalen stopped counting how many rules of physics they were breaking. She looked sideways at Thorne. Why don't more people come here? They do, he replied. But they rarely leave. That's not ominous at all, he smiled faintly. It's not about danger. It's about surrender. Kalen grimaced. I'm not good at that. That's why the hollow keeps letting you in. Another echo flickered in the underbrush, a blur of motion that stopped when Kalen stared too long. A child-shaped figure, translucent and flickering like old hologram tape. She turned to Thorne. One of yours. He shook his head. One of yours. And then she remembered. Tarn, the 6-year-old she'd tried to extract from a bomb transport dome on Callus Prime. He hadn't made it. She had. And her report hadn't mentioned him. Not even once. She reached for the image, but it vanished. The hollow wasn't punishing her. It was returning inventory. You said there was a network, she said, voice tight. An ancient one. Echo mind nodes. Still functional, some Thorne replied, but they don't connect the way they used to. The core lattice went dormant after the war. Too much emotional interference. Can we wake it? He paused. Maybe. If we can find the anchor. Kalen blinked. The what central node, he explained. They built it deep, under layers of terrain and memory. It's what tied the harmonics together, let users navigate not by sight, but by resonance overlap. Instinctual vectors. That's how you travel, Thorne nodded. It's how I am. Kalen thought about that. She'd trained with the best tactical navigators in the Oversight Corps, read terrain like code, mapped enemy movements by probability, but none of that ever taught her how to feel safe in a place like this. This wasn't a map. This was a confession. How do we find the anchor, she asked. We let it find us, Thorne replied, which sounded to Kalen like the least operationally sound plan in history. Still, Here she was. They came to a new barrier, not of stone or root, but of atmosphere. A field shimmered across the forest like glass melted into air. Thorn touched it gently. The surface didn't resist, but didn't permit either. It's a threshold, he said. Personal, Kalen frowned, meaning it's shaped by what you still deny. She stared at the field. It shimmered back. This forest has too many trust exercises. Thorn smiled. Only the necessary ones. Kalen stepped forward. The air buzzed against her skin like static wrapped in memory. And then a voice. Her voice. You know this was all your fault. Kalen froze. The field rippled with a mirror image. Her younger, cleaner, proud. The version of herself who had believed every order mattered because it was written in clean ink. You thought it was a strategy, the reflection said. It was just fear, dressed up in a uniform. Kalen clenched her fists. You sent good people into places you wouldn't walk. I walked, damn it, she snapped. After the smoke cleared, Thorn didn't speak, didn't move. This was her reckoning. The younger Kalen stared back. You want to be forgiven? Then admit you were wrong. I was, Kalen whispered. The air buzzed louder. I let logic become armor. Buzz. I traded instinct for protocol. Buzz. I turned people into statistics because that was easier than facing their faces. The field shattered, not violently but softly, like ice melting under the warmth of truth. Kalen staggered forward. The terrain beyond was silent and waiting. Thorn walked beside her again. You did it, he said. She didn't smile, but she did breathe. The hollow pulsed beneath them, a long, slow welcome. The terrain past the threshold changed with a reverence Kalen couldn't name. No more twitching shadows or erratic echoes, just a calm clarity like the forest itself had exhaled. The air was thicker not with danger, but with intention, as if every molecule here had been waiting for something unquantifiable to arrive. Thorn slowed his pace. His posture shifted, not cautious but careful. Kalen mirrored him. The ground underfoot turned smooth too smooth. Not rock, not soil, something older like petrified thought. In the distance, a dull thrum echoed steady and low, more felt in her jaw than heard. What is that? She whispered. Thorn didn't reply right away. Instead, he reached forward and placed a palm on the nearest tree. It didn't glow. It breathed, like the bark inhaled the moment of contact, exhaling a wave of not light, not sound, but recognition. Thorn turned to her. We're close. Kalen's body buzzed, not with nerves, but with anticipation she didn't remember authorizing. The anchor, she asked. He nodded. This is its margin. The resonance field is tight now, sensitive. Every thought we have from here on will shape what we see. She raised an eyebrow. That's been true since the start. Yes, he said, smiling slightly. But now the forest stops forgiving error. Kalen inhaled and stepped forward. As they moved deeper, the hollow's biological features gave way to geometry, hexagonal roots, spiraling bark, angular fungi that clicked in sequence like they were computing presence. She was inside her nervous system, a forest with memory, yes, but also with syntax. Was this all designed? She asked, half awed, half appalled. Guided, Thorn corrected. The original EchoMind teams didn't build the hollow. They tuned to it, reinforced it with neural scaffolding, amplified its tendency to remember. Kellen let her hand trail along a thick vine that pulsed gently under her touch. Why here? Because this was the one place on the planet that couldn't be mapped traditionally, Thorn said. Too unstable for satellite intel, too alive for drone patterns. That made it perfect. Perfect for what? For teaching surrender. They emerged into a circular grove. Kalen halted. At its center stood a monolith, stone-like, tree-like, and alive. Its surface undulates gently, as if breathing slowly and deeply. Every inch of it flickered with fragments of memory, not images, but moments. Laughter, panic, wonder, all compressed into kaleidoscopic distortions. The anchor. Even without knowing she knew. It's beautiful, she murmured. Thorn didn't answer. He walked forward slow and deliberate until he stood just shy of its edge. Then he knelt. Kalen followed suit. As they sat, the monolith responded, extending thin, translucent filaments toward them, like roots made of light wrapping gently around their feet, not trapping, but tethering. "What now?" she asked, hushed. "We open it." Kalen blinked. "With what, a password?" Thorne smiled. "No, with honesty." He reached forward and touched the monolith with his left hand. It didn't react immediately. Then a slow pulse, and another. Kalen's own thoughts began to echo back at her, not as words but as distortions around the edges of the grove. Her guilt, her pride, her usefulness, that secret addiction to being the one who made the right call when no one else could. The anchor didn't judge. It just mirrored. She hesitated, then pressed her own palm to its surface. The feedback was immediate. Memories she hadn't conjured in years surged up, her father teaching her to count by drawing in sand. Her first kill, the smell of rain on the day her division was disbanded. All of it offered without pretense, and the anchor accepted. Not like a machine crunching data, but like a friend who simply listens without interruption. Thorne spoke softly. "Once it recognizes us, it reconnects the lattice. The echo mine nodes we passed earlier will come online. New ones will emerge. And the wayless," she asked, "they'll see paths again. Not maps, not orders, just possibilities." Kalen looked at him, really looked, and in that moment realized something deeper. Thorne was still tethered, not to the hollow, but to her. He had chosen not just to survive, but to return, to teach, to reach her. And despite everything she'd done, he still believed she could walk forward. Kalen's throat tightened. "How long do we stay here?" she asked, her voice nearly cracking. "As long as it takes," Thorne said. "There's no clock on resonance." The anchor pulsed once more, then a flicker overhead, like a node blinking awake in the canopy. Then another, and another. Across the hollow, lights ignited in a web Kalen had no name for. Not a grid, not a pattern, a feeling interlinked, unpredictable, alive. The Echo Mind network was breathing again, and so was she. The moment the lattice breathed back into life, Kalen felt something she hadn't in decades: weightlessness. Not the absence of gravity, but the release of a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying. The anchor's pulse echoed outward, and with it a shift rippled through the hollow, like dawn pulling color into a grayscale world. Birdsong, faint and layered, not literal birds, but simulated sonic artifacts of remembered peace. Even Thorne, ever anchored in stillness, exhaled like someone who hadn't dared breathe too deep until now. Kalen turned to him. "So that's it?" "No," he said. "That's the beginning." Lights blinked across the tree line, points of resonance awakening like neurons reconnecting across a vast slumbering brain. From her pack, Kalen's HUD flickered to life, not as a tactical interface, but as a mirror. No data, just a pulsing echo that matched her breath. For the first time, the system wasn't watching her. It was responding. She smiled briefly. It didn't last, because the hum returned. Darker, angrier. This time, not just one drone, multiple. Kalen and Thorne stood together as beams of scanning light lanced between trees. Echelon sub-drones weren't guessing anymore. They were triangulating. The awakening of the network must have triggered some latent broadcast, a pulse the system couldn't interpret, so it defaulted to the one thing it knew: eradicate the unknowable. 3 drones swooped low, their casings slick and carbon black. The center one opened with its standard warning. "Cognitive breach detected. Reclassification in progress. Non-standard signatures present. Prepare for neutralization." Kalen drew her sidearm. Thorne raised a hand. "No," he said softly. Kalen blinked. "They'll shoot. They'll try." And then something extraordinary happened. The hollow bent toward them. Not the trees, not the ground. The entire biome. Resonance nodes blinked into activation, creating distortions in perception that twisted the path around the drones. One flickered and veered straight into a branch it hadn't seen. Another spun in a perfect loop and re-entered the same scan corridor 5 times in a row, like a fly stuck in its own perception. The third, the leader, hovered for a beat, then adjusted. Pattern corruption detected. Engaging override. Its lens opened wider. Kalen saw the shot before it fired. Instinct made her move, but she was slow. Thorne stepped in front. The blast hit and passed through, not in gore, in refusal. The beam didn't register on the terrain. It was like the hollow decided the attack had no place here, and the energy passed through the resonance fabric like light through oil. Kalen blinked. What the he's blind, the hollow whispered, not with words but with tone. He's become what can't be seen. Therefore, he can't be targeted. Thorn exhaled, untouched. Kalen's eyes widened. You're invisible to its logic. Not invisible, Thorn said. Incomprehensible. The lead drone began to buzz overheated processors trying to solve an emotional equation. Its shell began to ripple like it was being seen too clearly by a thing designed only for definitions. Then it collapsed, not exploded, just failed, folded into the forest like a spoiled thought. The other drones stopped. One hovered in place. The other backed away slowly like a dog catching the scent of its alpha and deciding it had made a grievous mistake. They withdrew, the hollow sealed behind them. Kalen stared at Thorn. You just nullified them. No, he corrected. We did. She looked around. The forest had responded not to Thorn, not to Kalen, but to their alignment. She'd stopped hiding. He'd stopped retreating. They stood together, and that had been enough to unmake an algorithm. Kalen couldn't help it. She laughed, loud, guttural, free. Thorn smiled softly, and it warmed her more than any bioreactive heat suit ever had. What now, she asked, wiping tears she didn't remember starting. We opened the path. Kalen raised an eyebrow. Didn't we do that? No, he said. We opened ours. He stepped forward, gestured toward the lattice. The nodes pulsed in a spiraling rhythm. He turned to her. The Whayless can see us now, feel us. If they want to leave, they can follow, and if they don't, then we sit with them, until they remember how to feel. Kalen nodded, then frowned. Wait, you're serious? You plan to stay here? Thorn looked around at the hollow, the lattice, the rising song of something ancient and new. I'm already home. She looked down at her own hands, then at the network of light, and she realized so was she. They didn't need to speak for the next hour, not out of tension, but because the hollow spoke better through silence. Every footstep Kalen took felt like a sentence punctuated with trust. The lattice responded in kind nodes, lighting subtly as she passed, not in anticipation, but in welcome. Somewhere overhead, the sky filtered through bioluminescent canopies that shimmered in tones she couldn't name colors. Her eyes weren't built to process, but her breath somehow understood. They reached a ridge, natural, jagged, as though tectonic regret had pushed it up over millennia. From its peak, Kalen could see the hollow stretch outward in a pattern no satellite would map. Not concentric, not linear, but emotional, like a topography of choices made and unmade. Clusters of Whayless were moving now. Not many, just a few. But she saw it. One paused to touch a tree as if asking permission. Another stood in open space, eyes closed, swaying to an internal song. Thorn watched quietly. Kalen leaned on a root. You sure they'll all come? No, he said. But some will, and that's enough. He tilted his head. Is it ever not? Kalen chuckled under her breath. I was trained to think otherwise. You were trained to calculate. She thought about that for a long moment. Then I don't think I even knew I was lonely. Thorn didn't flinch. That's what makes it worse. A breeze moved through the lattice, stirring the trees with a sound like applause underwater. Kalen turned, catching a glimpse of a shape between trunks. Tall, deliberate. It wasn't a drone. It was a man. Older, worn. His eyes are cloudy, not blind like Thorn's, but overused, burned out by seeing too much of the wrong thing. He stepped into view. Kalen went stiff. That's Commander Rith. Thorn said nothing. The man approached slowly. His uniform was frayed but intact. Oversight insignia rank badge. The old regime, Rin, the man said. Her pulse stumbled. You're supposed to be dead, she murmured. I am, he said softly. And then she realized he wasn't here. Not physically. He was a projection, her memory collated by the hollow, but his eyes were too alive, too real. Why now, she asked. He shrugged. You crossed the threshold. That's when I got permission. For what to say thank you? Kalen's throat tightened. For what? For ending me. Silence. Even the hollow paused. He stepped closer. I gave you that final order. Wipe Echo Mind. Purge the prototypes. Cover the whole damn thing in euphemisms and leave it off the books. Kaylin felt herself break again. A new fracture. One she didn't know she'd needed. I carried that, she whispered. I know, the commander said. I needed you to, but I shouldn't have. He placed a hand over his own chest and faded. Not with pain, but with relief. Kaylin collapsed to her knees. Not out of grief, but out of sudden lightness. Thorn was beside her in seconds, not touching, just present. You let him go, he said. She nodded. No more ghosts. Thorn looked toward the sky where a new lattice thread had blinked into life. Then it's time. Kaylin stood slowly. They descended the ridge, not alone, not anymore. Behind them, the Wayless began to move, as if some internal compass had reactivated. No one shouted directions. No one led. They just walked. Toward a resonance they could finally feel. Kaylin turned to Thorn. This is it, isn't it? The formless path. He nodded. You can't see it. Only follow. She hesitated. And once we step onto it, we don't come back, he said gently. Not the way we were. Kaylin looked back, then forward, then took his hand. Together they stepped, and the forest opened. The moment her foot crossed into the space between structured terrain and formless resonance, Kaylin felt her sense of place dissolve, not violently, but gently, like sugar melting into warm water. There was no path, no horizon, and yet she wasn't lost. The formless path was not a trail so much as an agreement between her and the forest, between intention and surrender. She couldn't tell how far they had walked. Distance was irrelevant here. Each step adjusted her balance, not just physically but emotionally. A lurch of doubt and the terrain would wobble, a surge of clarity and it would firm beneath her. Thorn didn't lead. He didn't need to. He simply walked, and the hollow responded not to his direction, but to his resonance. Kaylin tried to emulate it, to unsee, unthink. It was like untraining every reflex she had built during her years in oversight recon. No maps, no top-down logic, just her breath and whatever emotion she dared to admit. It was terrifying. It was freeing. At one point, they passed through a veil of mist that whispered phrases in her voice, phrases she'd said to recruits, to superiors, to herself. You're lucky to be alive. This isn't personal. Orders are orders. Each phrase curled into her bones and slid out again, like toxins being drawn from a wound. Thorn didn't comment, but when the mist faded, he quietly offered her a piece of fruit from a nearby vine, purple and glowing, its texture pulsing like a heartbeat. Kaylin took it, bit in. It tasted like the one dish her mother used to make on nights she didn't have the energy to be strong. Just soft rice and mint. How she asked. The hollow remembers you, Thorn said, when you forget how to nourish yourself. Kaylin didn't cry, but she didn't smile either. She simply walked. They came upon a node brighter than the rest. It pulsed not like the anchor had, but more urgently. It was broadcasting not just locally, but across the hollow. A call. Someone had heard them. Kaylin stepped forward and touched the node. Her HUD flickered again, but this time, instead of crashing, it stabilized. For the first time, the system wasn't resisting the hollow. It was sinking. A single line of text appeared in the corner. Unmapped vector confirmed. Coordinates none. Status valid. She stared, then laughed. The system had given up on pinning her location and instead marked it simply as valid. She turned to Thorn. You just broke protocol by existing. He shrugged. It was brittle anyway. Kaylin tapped the node again. A projection bloomed this time, not a figure, but a pathway of light that rippled outward. The projection extended beyond the hollow, through dead infrastructure, through collapsed comm towers and derelict neural beacons. The Echo Mind network was reclaiming itself, one pulse at a time. Thorn frowned. What she asked. The signal might catch more than allies, he said. Echelon still listens. And not everything that hears will understand. Kaylin nodded. Let them come. She tapped the node again, this time with intent. Broadcast it. The pulse launched. Every lattice blinked. Every memory node responded. The hollow sang, not with words, with feeling. And somewhere outside the forest in an underground lab filled with cold lighting and terrified analysts, an alert blinked red. The system they thought they'd erased just blinked back into life, but this time with no center to destroy, no single point to purge. Kalen turned to Thorn. You said something before about how the purge didn't kill Echo Mine. He nodded. It scattered us. And that made you invisible to Echelon? Yes. She looked around, watching the forest light up with movement. Wayless stepping into Clarity drones disoriented by phantom paths. You weren't destroyed, she said. You became unsolvable. Thorn smiled. Like music with no sheet. Kalen grinned. Then let's make it louder. The network was awake now. Not just alive, but aware. As Kalen and Thorn moved through the harmonized channels of the formless path, each step left a resonance imprint, a kind of breadcrumb trail for those attuned enough to sense it. Not visible, not audible, just undeniable. Kalen had stopped second-guessing the terrain hours ago. Time, like space, no longer behaved predictably. Every now and then, a new node blinked into activation, flaring like a firefly at the moment someone somewhere felt their way forward. The Wayless were beginning to move with purpose. Some as individuals, some in loose clusters, connected not by orders, but by mutual understanding. In one section, Kalen saw a woman guiding a child with her hand over his eyes so he wouldn't rely on vision, but intuition. A former officer helping a war orphan unlearn certainty. HFY, she thought. Not because of strength, because of surrender. At one node, they found an old transmission hub, rusted, overtaken by vines, long thought dead. Kalen placed her hand against it, expecting nothing. Instead, it chimed, a low, soft tone. Then a message in broken syntax, echo returning, vector chaotic, meaning restored. She turned to Thorn. The network's teaching itself. He nodded. Learning through feedback, reinforcement, organic AI, but emotionally bound. Kalen laughed once. We built God and gave it stage fright. No, Thorn said. We taught it fear, and it decided to be silent. Now it was speaking again. They continued toward the deepest part of the hollow, the cradle, Thorn called it. It was the first node ever tuned, the place where the engineers of Project Echo Mine had stood decades ago, thinking they could chart empathy like star maps. Kalen didn't know what she expected. A shrine, a server. What she found instead was a pool. Still, clear, shimmering not with light but with emotion, as though it reflected not your face but your state of being. She looked into it and saw herself not in uniform, not in regret. Just Kalen, quiet, breathing, present. I think I'm scared, she admitted. Thorn sat beside her. So am I. Why? Because now we matter again. She blinked. You don't think we did before, I think we forgot how to notice. They both dipped fingers into the water. The ripples didn't spread outward. They spiraled inward, converging at a central point in the pool. From that convergence bloomed an image, thousands of threads of resonance, all leading into the hollow, and thousands more leading out. Exit vectors, Kalen breathed. Thorn nodded. Once the lattice aligns fully, it will reach beyond this place. Into cities, outposts, maybe even orbit. She stared. We could navigate without ships. We could travel without roads. She sat back, mind racing. You're telling me this isn't just a sanctuary. It's a system, a new kind of infrastructure. He nodded. But one built on surrender, she continued. Feeling instead of control. That'll terrify every regime left standing. Thorn didn't answer. He didn't need to, because above them the sky flickered. 3 black dots pierced the canopy, sleek, angular, moving faster than thought. Kalen rose instantly. Incoming. Echelon Prime, Thorn murmured. She clenched her fists. I thought the drones were bad. They were fingers, Thorn said. This is the brain. The hollow reacted, not in panic but in readiness. Every node pulsed once, acknowledging the presence of something incompatible, something foreign. Kalen's HUD began to stutter again. Data vomited across her vision. Deviation index high. Logic fracture alert. Perceptual anomaly flagged. Then a message. Surrender objective. Disconnect network. Or be purged. Kalen looked at Thorn. We can't fight that. No, he said, but we can't outgrow it. He stepped into the pool. Kaylin hesitated. What are you? Trust me? He extended a hand. She took it. The pool reacted. A surge of resonance. Not a wave, but a choir. A chorus of every awakened node, every person they'd touched, every moment of honesty offered to the hollow. Echelon Prime hesitated overhead. Scanning. Rescanning. Unable to classify what was happening, Kaylin whispered, "It doesn't know how to fight something it can't target." Exactly, Thorne said. They closed their eyes. The hollow expanded, not in size, in meaning. And then Echelon Prime blinked once and vanished, like a virus deleted by empathy itself. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was sacred. The hollow exhaled long, as if it had been holding its breath for an entire generation. The light among the resonance nodes softened, no longer pulsing in alarm, but breathing like a lullaby. Even the air felt denser, filled with something softer than relief and heavier than peace. Kaylin sat at the edge of the pool. Thorne beside her, their fingers still dipped in the echoing water. Neither moved, neither spoke, because the hollow was speaking for them. Kaylin could feel it in her chest, thousands of others waking up across the overgrown ruins of the neural sector. They weren't connected like a network. They were resonating like an orchestra, tuning each note imperfect, but unmistakably alive. What happens now? She asked, voice barely a whisper. Thorne didn't answer right away. He looked toward the sky, now visible through parting leaves, bluer than it had been in years. Not because the pollution cleared, but because she was finally looking without expectation. Now he said slowly, "We become the map." Kaylin raised an eyebrow. "That's vague even for you." He smiled. "You wanted structure. But this is a direction born from presence, from emotion, from being." She considered that. The network wasn't just an escape, it was reinvention. Not running from something, but walking toward the unknowable. Thorne turned to her, voice almost inaudible. "We guide. We don't lead. We show by standing still long enough to be seen." Kaylin nodded. "You mean we become the kind of certainty others can rest inside?" He tilted his head. "Exactly." Below them the pool shimmered. A new ripple emerged, an unfamiliar one. A signature they didn't recognize. Someone else had stepped onto the formless path. Kaylin watched the echo rise, forming a hazy image. Someone alone, scared, but walking forward despite not knowing where they were going. It reminded her of herself, of all of them. More signatures followed, a trickle becoming a stream. And Kaylin realized something simple, something deeply human. Hope is contagious when it's lived, not preached. She reached into her pouch and pulled out her old military tag, metal cold, still carrying weight. She held it over the pool, paused, then let it fall. It vanished beneath the surface without a sound. "Goodbye, uniform," she whispered. Thorne raised his hand and gently placed it on hers. "Welcome, Kaylin." They sat a while longer, not as sentinels, not as survivors, but as guides. People who had faced the impossible and chosen not to fight it, but to understand it, feel it, and make peace with its refusal to be labeled. The hollow would grow now, not in size, in truth. And those who couldn't be mapped, they would always have a place here. A path, a rhythm, a direction, even if they didn't know it yet. So now we rest, not because the work is done, but because the path no longer demands urgency. The hollow sleeps with one eye open, resonating gently beneath the surface of a world too eager to sort, to label, to command. Kaylin and Thorne do not return to the world of definitions. They stay in the space in between, quietly mapping safety in the form of stillness, guidance without expectation. The Waylass arrive not in droves, but as wanderers, finding their steps again, not through logic, but through the soft alignment of breath and ground. Some will stay, some will leave. All will change. The Echo Mind lattice no longer needs wires or commands. It hums through human ache, memory, surrender. It cannot be hacked because it has no code. It cannot be shut down because it exists in the one place no system dares claim, the unquantifiable. The formless path isn't a place on a map. It's a decision. To feel when it's easier not to trust when the world demands proof, to walk with instead of ahead. Kaylin and Thorne will walk for as long as others wander, not to lead them, not to protect them, but to remind them you are not alone, even if your coordinates say otherwise. And maybe that's what humanity always was at its best. Not the strongest, not the smartest, but the only ones who kept walking when the lights went out, trusting that even darkness has resonance.